Good evening and welcome to the final event in We Teach Well's involvement with the Digital Innovation Futures Festival of 2023, something that we've been involved with now since 2019. And it's a very significant part of our year, particularly given that I am an English teacher and our business is English teachers. We're not technology people, but we do believe that I very firmly believe that any discussion around technology and new technology needs to involve the voices of K to 12 teachers, because there is no group of people on the planet who will use the technology more than our students. And we need to teachers, tech teachers and people with smarter people than me, tech-wise, need to be able to point out what works and what doesn't in schools, what things are different that people just don't realize when they talk about working with K to 12, which is for those kindergarten through to year 12, or the beginning to the end of formal undergraduate teaching. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Catherine Newington. Catherine and I met several years ago and have built up a very strong relationship. She's the person I go to for one of those smarter tech people that I mentioned before. Catherine at the moment works for with the Australian Computing Society, which is the governing body of IT in Australia. She has set up and runs the education arm. And if there are teachers here who haven't checked that out, you need to go in and have a look at the resources that are provided there for free for teachers in the digital literacy curriculum. That would be right?
Yeah, and the digital technologies curriculum.
That's the one, digital technologies curriculum. Told you she's smarter than I am. So why are we doing an action research project? Probably the title of the project, Action Research Project, for some people makes it sound more formal than it actually is. I just came up with the thought of teachers working together. So that's action. And we're researching how this AI works. So action research. Probably more like an extended teach meet. There are a lot of people doing incredible work in tertiary, in universities on AI and how it affects in different forms of different K to 12 situations. And we're going to be sharing some of those resources freely with the community once this goes on demand, which it will, like straight after this launch session. My reason for doing it was twofold. First of all, we discovered for the first time that the DIF Festival, which the Victorian government puts on every year, has been given funding for 2 years. Usually it's sort of year by year, and we have to wait to find out. This year, we know there's going to be one next year. So I thought it might be useful to do something where we spend some time looking at this AI thing, and then next year bring any learnings and things that we have to the close it off for the festival next year. And the other thing was I was hearing from a lot of contacts or colleagues about AI, some people loving it, some not sure about it, some not knowing how to begin. And these were all working educators, teachers. And I thought, really the Teach Me model has worked really well. So maybe this idea of a community of educators and teachers just feeding back to each other and, what they're trying, what's working, what isn't working. Yes, there's a lot going on in tertiary, but doesn't seem that information always translates or gets to teachers in their classrooms as fast as we would sometimes like it to. And that's something we can do too during this, is we'll look for those resources and share them where we can. So, Catherine, your thoughts on looking at the use of AI, and with this for teachers and educators. We're not going near students, because that's a whole different ethical framework. This is just for teachers. What do you think needs to happen to get teachers using AI with confidence and skill?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of teachers out there who are really inquisitive about generative AI and how it can support their planning. And I think one of the first things that piece of advice that I would give to any teacher who is starting out in this space is be gentle on yourself. So generative AI and using technology when you first start using it, whether it's within your teaching as a tool or to supplement and help you create the lesson plans and do more of that admin work that teachers are doing, which I think we're going down that path for AI, is that it can at times feel extremely overwhelming to start using something and take little baby steps to use technology, and also give yourself some time to develop the skills around it. So if you're brand new to using generative AI, ChatGPT seems to be the tool that is the one that is most talked about. That don't just expect to do something straight away and have it immediately perfect in your classroom. When it does come to technology, there are times that you would make mistakes with it, or it's not utilizing it the best way. So my first piece of advice is to be gentle on yourself and give yourself sufficient breathing time to explore this new technology.
Yeah.
So your breathing space, it could be 2 or 3 days, or it could be a whole entire term. And then that way you can get to know the technology yourself and then slowly start to implement it in. Do not expect from day one to be an expert on it, and just be open and the flexibility to learn. And then also, as you're starting to learn and understand the technology, the next important thing to look at is understanding the pros and cons of how you're using the technology. At the end of the day, something like ChatGPT was not created specifically for educators. So they were marketing generative AI. Educators have picked up that technology and the tool, and there are pros and cons to utilizing that piece of technology in your classroom. As you start to formulate those pros and cons, you'll start to work with the technology and work out its strengths and weaknesses, and reframe those weaknesses into strengths that you can use for your classroom. So there's a lot to unpack when you first start to use technology into your teaching, where it looks like, however it looks in your classroom.
There's a couple of comments that people have made in some of our other events this year, because obviously Adriano De Prato hosted a brilliant session on AI and the Age of Human with Lauren Sayer, Adriano, Leon Furs, and Michelle Dennis. And a couple of them said, Lauren said at one point, right at the beginning, she said, we have to remember this is the worst version we will ever have.
Yeah.
So it's just going to get better.
Yes, it will get better and easier with, and teachers would get better with using it too. More functionalities might come out. You'll be able to share ideas about what's working well, what's not working well. And then that will really help you, again, unpack how you can get that tool to work best for you as an educator.
Yeah. Another thing that was said, Michelle said it, and Michelle Dennis, for those of you who don't know her, is she's the head of digital at Haileybury, which is now a sort of global school. This is one super smart tech lady. And she was talking about Midjourney. She was trying to use Midjourney, and she said you never get it the first prompt. She said it took many prompts for her to get to a point with quite sophisticated language before it could give her what she was after. So for those of us who are not Michelle or people of her skill, what you're saying is right. Go easy on yourself, because it's going to take time.
Yes. Yep. Because you've got to be able just to give yourself that space to learn, to then reflect and evaluate how it's working for you, and then make it work better for the next time too.
And that's important, isn't it? Because one of the reasons for this project, and one of the things we would like to see, of course, is that this is teachers helping teachers. This is sharing knowledge of what worked for one and may not work for someone else. People can chat, ask questions of each other, share resources that they've found that works. As I said, we're going to create a resource file that'll go along with it, that we'll build on over the time, where people can add resources that they've come across, things that are useful, and have access to those conversations. We'll probably meet maybe once a month on an open Zoom that people can jump into if they want to. Teachers can come and go from the project over the year. They don't have to commit to the entire duration. But it's somewhere to come and play. Really, no pressure, safely come and have a go at trying this tool out, because always remember it is a tool. And it's a tool that must serve your pedagogy, not the other way around.
Yes, yeah. And that was a perfect segue into what I was just wanting to talk about too, is pedagogy is really, and your pedagogy as a teacher is always and should be at the forefront of understanding who you are, and what you deliver and how you deliver that content to your students. So a pedagogical framework that I'm constantly coming back to years after being out of the classroom, but still use it in my teaching and supporting teachers across Australia, is the TPAC framework. And the TPAC framework is, we've got 3 bubbles, and it looks at the impact of teaching and learning based on technology, content, and pedagogy. And when we're using all of those 3, we look at what is happening in the classroom. And when we put AI into that, it's now become a technology tool. So understanding how that technology tool can be utilized to ensure that the content or the curriculum that we're teaching is aligning, and we are honoring that curriculum for our students. If we're using this generative tool and it's not hitting the curriculum content descriptions that we need to teach, then it's a tool that is not being utilized well in the classroom. And then making sure we've got that pedagogy, understanding who you are as a teacher to make that generative AI tool work the best for you. I know who I am as a teacher, and a lot of my lesson plans and reflect that. But most importantly, the tools that I use in the classroom reflect that pedagogy too. So I'm really based on, mine is real life applications and that student-driven projects. So making sure that we're engaging students with the learning, but most importantly, it's meaningful. So how I would use AI to help me create content from my classroom is creating that, or helping me fast track to create that content to provide to students. So, and it all comes down to understanding who I am as a teacher and making sure that technology marries with who I am as an educator. And it's going to be different for everyone.
Because, and that's the next point, is every classroom, every year level, every class you teach is going to be different also.
Absolutely. Yeah. Underpinning everything is the students, because we are doing everything for our students. And our cohort from year on and year on can look totally different.
Yeah. And one of the things I'd like you to briefly sort of refer to is, so the big thing has been ChatGPT.
Yeah.
ChatGPT is not the only AI tool out there.
Correct. Yeah,
And
correct.
some teachers may already be using. And one of the things that you and I have talked about over the years is the idea of people bringing out some form of tech that they've tried to sell to schools or teachers, but it's standard. It's like the same for every, there's no way of changing it, or you know, they sell it as a whole school thing when whole school things rarely work.
Absolutely. It's that cookie cutter style of education that we want to get away from. And I think generative AI tools and platforms out there, I think as a teacher and utilizing it from a teacher perspective, I think is really going to help us create resources and lesson plans and teaching material that can really suit the needs of our students.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I've always looked out for is always ask yourself the questions, how does it marry to my pedagogy? And then also, how does it support my student learning?
Mm. So as from what I can see, and we're sort of making a list as we go on. I know there's Midjourney, and a couple of Plex. Yeah, there's another one, and they do different things.
They do. That's it. And by understanding, again, going back to that comment that I made before, is understanding the strengths and weaknesses of these digital tools, you'll be able to pick the right one for you at the time and identifying what works well for you. So there's some amazing generative AI tools that work with images. So art teachers would find that really, really helpful. If you're wanting to create an image stimulus to start a topic of discussion, something like that would be perfect for it. But if you want something to help you create and generate a written lesson plan, then that AI tool is not going to be supportive of that.
Of
So
that.
it's about recognizing what it does and how can it best work for you.
Yeah. Which means that people can be over this period of time, people can be trying different ones
Oh,
and
absolutely.
starting to have a play around. I mean, I'm very keen to play with one. And there was somebody posted one early on this year. He was a history class, I think, and he had a bust of it was either Aristotle or his Plato, I think, or Sophocles, one of the big three big Greeks. And he had a bust of the head just almost rotating in air, speaking the words.
Oh,
And I am dying to try and find a way of having an author thing talking about their work, or
yes.
speaking a play. Yeah, I mean, my mind's like, oh, I really want to have a go at trying this and this and this,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
how helpful that could be for an
yeah.
English teacher.
And that's perfect because you're putting that technology tool in the context of your teaching and how you would utilize it to and adapting it. And those ideas, the more that we share, the more ideas we can formulate. And I think teachers are really, really amazing at getting one idea and creating new ideas from that and how best it could suit their needs too.
Yeah, there's an issue I want to bring. It's sort of a twofold issue. So let me get it out. And so one of the issues is going to be what data do we upload into
Yes.
these AI, these platforms, with the idea that what we upload is going to go to building that tool. So
Yeah,
it's
correct.
gathering information. Um, and as um, Matt said, who we're going to be hearing from a bit later, if educators don't provide the data to build these tools, then business is going to,
Oh, that is a really good point.
or manufacturing is going to. And that's not necessarily going to turn the tool into something that becomes helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I found that really interesting because I hadn't thought about it. That
Yeah.
idea of helping to shape what the tool becomes.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the most important thing when we are experimenting and looking at these tools is check the data privacy policy.
Yeah.
Understand what happens when you put in an entry. Because you're right, what happens with ChatGPT is any information that we put into it, that's then building the AI and the data set. So
Yeah.
the more information that goes into it, the more it builds, which sounds fantastic. But I think as educators, we have to be cautious about what information we are putting in. And I think when it comes to creating resources and lessons that are away from the students, I think is a really great starting point,
Mm,
and not involving any student data because we just don't know yet.
no.
And I think utilizing it, you might just need a quick definition of something, or you might need, to reframe and a definition of a topic that you're doing in the classroom. And ChatGPT can write a beautiful definition for you in however many words you want. So it could be create a definition in 3 sentences and use that to help the students gain the knowledge of what your subject area is.
Mm,
Yeah, looking at the data privacy is something that would be great to investigate and understand how each of those tools are operating and using. So the example is that ChatGPT is no lot like the hard stop date for the free model is 2021. And so that means that there's not a lot of data when we're looking at curriculum. The Australian curriculum was recently came out, or it came out after 2021, which means there's not a lot of information within ChatGPT about the version 9 Australian curriculum. So
okay.
that's just an example. If you're a Victorian teacher, it means that that new curriculum that we're going to have, or it is starting to come out, is not going to be there because that's not collecting that data. The data will be part of what the input is. So
Mm,
it's just those considerations, and again, understanding those strengths and weaknesses. And it means that if you are using the Australian curriculum, that you might have to be specific on the content descriptor that you're putting into.
okay. So if I was asked, so I did some searching um, for on the AITSL documents and on the ACARA document for Victoria, for no, for the Australian curriculum for years 7 to 10 English, what were the pillars and the skills, and got returns on that very quickly. So are you saying that is that information would have come from previously to
Yeah, double check it.
2021?
Yeah, double check
Oh,
it. Just
we
yeah.
did do a check.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and I think just yeah, and it's also coming into my next point is making you are the educator, you are the professional. Don't trust everything that
oh gosh,
ChatGPT,
yes.
that's part of it. Going understanding what you want to do. I used ChatGPT recently to help me create a PowerPoint slide around data compression for year 9s and 10s. And I know what data compression is. I know some of the strengths and weaknesses, but to articulate it and create that PowerPoint from scratch is a lot of time consuming
Yeah,
effort for me to go through. And I put in and I asked it to create 10 slides, and I named exactly what I wanted to have on each slide. There was, instead of creating content, my focus and attention came to editing content.
yeah,
So there were some things in there that the information one was correct, but there was the way that some of the information was created didn't align and it didn't sound like me. And
yeah.
there were some words in there. So I had to go back and I spent time editing it, but I certainly reduced the amount of time to
Oh,
create something like that from scratch, but also allowing teachers, and when you are using something like that, allowing not just to do the cut and paste, allow time for that editing phase. And you're
yeah,
going to emphasize more than what would normally happen, that editing phase.
yeah. The time thing for me just is probably the aspect of it that really excites me for teachers, knowing how time poor teachers are, the possibility of these to save time for those admin tasks. So, for instance, with the ACARA documents, they're out there. I mean, AITSL has all these on their website. ACARA has all these out in the public domain. You don't have to go far to find it.
Yeah,
It's just that ChatGPT found it quicker than I would, and
exactly. Yep.
summarized it more quickly.
Yep.
So that ability to save teachers time, I think, is worth a lot, if nothing else.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Just to be able to fast track the information and knowing that you are still the expert on that subject matter and still the expert of what needs to be taught and what curriculum content descriptor you're still assessing and trying to teach to.
Yeah, and that you are the one who's going to decide whether the way it's delivered up to you sounds right, or sounds like you would,
Yes.
or is something that your students would understand.
Yeah, I was just and it's explained in a way that your students would understand, because if you've got a classroom, they might be low literacy students, and if you're giving them wads of written information, it's not going to work for those
No.
students.
Okay, so can we have a quick let's briefly or not, the privacy issue and the security issue at the very top of the questions, that and ethics for teachers in K to 12.
Yeah. So there have been like again going. This is just the research that I've done on ChatGPT. There have been data breaches with ChatGPT. So there have been times where the information that you put in, they were able to. It was exposed. So I think one of them, the data breaches, was if you had a premium account, and then everything that had gone into ChatGPT was available. So there, it's, and I think the data breaches that happened with ChatGPT were the beginning of this year. So again, understanding what is the limitations of those technologies and what could happen going forward. So there are organizations that have banned ChatGPT because they cannot monitor what goes into ChatGPT and what data that you're putting in there. That could be sensitive data. There's no way to monitor that. So that's one of the reasons why I know organizations have stopped the utilizing ChatGPT in organizations.
But banning ChatGPT is not banning AI.
No, correct. Yep. Yep.
So an organization, a school organization, department can be nervous about one particular AI because of
Yes.
those
Well,
things,
it's the
but
most
still,
talked about one.
yeah, but still there are others that are being used
Absolutely.
safely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So just to sort of wrap up a little bit more about the project, as I said before, teachers can come in and out, or educators, they don't have to be classroom teachers, can come in and out, sharing information, asking questions of each other. And we really, what we want to be able to say at the end of the 12 months is that we have more of an idea of what teachers have found works, what they've found doesn't work, where the red hazard lights go on, what has been helpful and what hasn't been helpful over that. And that's really the main sort of thing that we want to find out and achieve by the end of it, is have teachers having a bit more real-time information at their fingertips about what they can use and what they prefer not to. Have you any other thoughts on that?
No, I think being it's a long journey, but getting to that point where you can articulate what platforms, and it doesn't have to just be related to AI, but getting to the point where you're able to articulate why you're using something and the advantages and disadvantages and how it's working well is an extremely valuable place to be at when it does come to digital technologies and the
Countries.
tools that we use in the classroom. And it does take a long time to get there.
One of the things that I found interesting, and I think worth mentioning, once they started talking about ChatGPT, I was getting emails from Canva, from ConvertKit, who are our email provider, from HubSpot, who are our CRM. These are all big companies that I find I use because I think they're valuable and ethical, and others about their AI. So they didn't suddenly, when ChatGPT came out, suddenly come up with this new AI. That AI had been running on their programs for quite some time. It's just we hadn't necessarily thought about it as AI.
Yes, yeah,
Um,
exactly. It's a real buzzword at the moment. And it came, and I think ChatGPT put a real big spotlight on AI. And then, but it's been used so often in so many platforms already. But I think it's also we, the users, have the option to use something and to generate our own information and to utilize it in a way that makes our job much easier.
yeah, because I hadn't realized before when when I go onto a streaming channel on the television and it says recommended for you,
Yep.
that AI has been looking at what I have watched and they are coming up with, it has come
Yes.
up with programs that
Yep.
fit in. But it hadn't occurred to me that that was artificial
That was
intelligence, and yet it
yeah,
was.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
not,
and I think there's so many yeah, if you've ever gone onto, a website and a chatbot has come up and, you're putting details in, that's also AI.
yeah. So it's been there. It's just we haven't necessarily thought about it as AI. So it's
Mm.
not something that we need to be afraid of.
Yeah, correct. And I think we've always used it based on how that website or platform has been using it. So I suppose those two examples, the Netflix one, that's quite a passive use of it. So you're not really controlling too much, but you look at ChatGPT and
Mm,
you control 100% of the information that goes into it in those prompts.
yeah,
So it certainly has been around, but I think what's changed is we as the users can control so much more.
more. And that's the thing, isn't it? You're in control of it, not the other way around.
Yeah, that there's those guidelines and restrictions on what that company has decided to use it for. But yeah, we have been exposed to AI for many, many years. And I think we will continue to be, and we'll just see what other, as you said before, this is one of the just the beginning of it, and where it will go within the next couple of months and years is, I think, a really exciting time and space to be in.
Yeah, I think so too. As I said, I'm not a tech person as such. I am an enthusiast though, and I do love the things that it can do.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
you're a tech person then, because no one's,
oh,
and I think one of the other points then is don't feel as though you have to be an expert in this every single generative
exactly.
AI tool that is out there. It's about that broad understanding is a lot for you to be using, and that knowledge is great for you to be using and then pass on to someone
Someone
else.
else. Yeah. We're also going to hear this evening from Nicola Moorish down at Christian College in Geelong. She's going to be talking. She's talking about how they introduced it into their school, and how they made sure that they worked with the teachers first and spent time getting the teachers cognizant of how the platform worked. And Matt Zarb from Western Australia, who talks about how we go about feeding and building and shaping the tools as as you say, as they become generative and everything we put in makes them bigger. But thank you, Catherine, as always, for your input and your generosity of time. And
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Matt Zarb from Helena College in Western Australia. Hi, Matt.
Hey, how you going?
I'm doing okay. I just made a terrible technical error, which I'm going to admit, but I'm just not going to tell you what it is. You're, as I said, over in WA, and we spoke briefly on line at an event about this idea of doing this AI sort of action research thing among teachers. I guess it's, in some ways, it's probably more like an ongoing teach meet where teachers are supporting each other and talking about things. And this, of course, is to do with the dominant subject in education debate this year, which is the use of AI. And I remember you telling me that you use AI all the time.
Yep. Yeah, I do. I look almost every day, if not every day, probably every couple of days, I'll be using some type of AI. So whether it's ChatGPT, use a bit of the stuff in the Microsoft Edge browser, bunch of stuff. What I've been doing fairly recently is I've been using something called Gamma for presentations, and that's been awesome. Like it's a presentation software that I can plug in a few commands. It'll just come up with some presentation for me. So that's been gold.
Yeah, that would be that wonderful thing that happens when you're looking at a blank page and thinking, where do I begin?
Yeah. So a big part of that is that whole blank page thing. It's one of the conversations that people say is, well, what do I need to do as a teacher? Well, you still need to be there. You need to be part of it because our job is going to still be teaching. But that conversation about, I don't know where to start. If I've got some ideas, I can just plug in a few ideas in there. I can put them into, let's say, ChatGPT. That works. And it'll give me a bit of a framework or an outline to work from. And then I can't just use it like that. I've got to shape it. I've got to change it. I've got to make it fit my context. So that's a big part of for me. I look at it, but it gets me started, and it's really good to get going from there. So that's a great way to get started.
Yeah, because we're often pretty sure about what we don't want, but we can't quite work out what we do want.
Yeah.
And if there's something to work with, that's helpful. Time. One of the things that I'm excited about it is that it can save a lot of time for teachers, which is like gold. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, one thing teachers say to us is, if I had more time, I could do this. And I think that's one area AI is going to really be helpful in. It saves time doing a lot of things that would take me time. So that presentation software, if I'm writing a presentation and I need some PowerPoints or Google Slides or whatever it is I'm using, that might take me an hour, 2 hours to do. If I can get AI to do it, I just shape the ideas and go, well, I need that changed. I need this a little bit. That's got to be a bit clearer. And I can get that done in maybe 10, 15 minutes tops. So it saves me time. A lot of the conversations in there, even when we're talking about so trying to explain concepts and trying to understand concepts. So I used that. I was trying to teach a concept that was quite new to me in year 6 with my little guys, and I just went, well, here's what I'm trying to teach. Here's the content that I'm trying to get out there. And this thing made a PowerPoint. So I explained this to a 10-year-old, and it was brilliant. I understood what was going on. They understood what was going on. I told them that AI and I worked together on this. It wasn't just an AI thing. We were kind of co-collaborators there, and they loved it. So Some of the stuff like crayon for images, I was trying to get students to understand. We're working on a tiny house scenario where they were designing their own tiny house, but I wanted them to get some different ideas for designing what it looked like. Just chuck some of those in, plugged in some ideas, and it came out with a bunch of different tiny house ideas that were amazing. Like the stuff I wouldn't have been able to think of, that kind of took my thoughts and expanded on them and made them amazing. I thought that was great. That was really helpful. So yeah, that's a great area where it's really good. I use it a fair bit for, even like we were talking the other day about writing some tests. So let's see what it's like for writing tests. And it did some stuff that was really helpful for me. Like I can get it to write tests. I can get it to have model answers. Some of the things you then have to go, yeah, I need to shape some of those. I don't like how that's, and I think in Australia it's a little different because some of what was happening was it was using American terminology, which I didn't really like, and I had to kind of adapt that. But by and by, it was actually really helpful. Did some stuff really quickly that helped me to just nail the little bits and pieces.
That's an interesting point you make about the American expression. If a student gives you a piece of work and all the expressions and the spellings are in US, then you can be pretty sure that they didn't do it.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that's one of the areas. That's the conversation about plagiarism, and how do I know it's AI and it's just kind of someone throwing stuff in there. I think you have to know your students. You have to have that conversation with students, and regardless of AI. I mean, before I knew what AI was, I'd read things in essays that students wrote, and I'd go, geez, that's profound. Like, that's amazing. And I'd go and talk to the student about it. And you'd know pretty quickly, they'd look at you kind of sheepish and go, explain this a bit more, because that's really good what you've written. And they just look at you like, I don't really know. I just Googled that. And you're like, okay, so that's where, as a teacher, you've got to know your students. You know what they kind of normally put out, and I'm expecting they get better, but
not that much, not that fast.
Yeah. If it's exponential growth really quickly, you just go, oh, okay, where'd that come from? But on the flip side of that, the AI detectors, as soon as ChatGPT was out, we got the AI detectors out there straight away going, these are going to detect if kids are using AI. Took me probably 10 minutes to get past that. And it went from 99% AI to 49% or 59%. And you then get to that point where you go, am I going to say to my students, am I the kind of teacher that goes, well, I think you've just cheated on this and you've just put it through ChatGPT? Or am I going to actually work with the students to help them use something like this to help them, to help us? So the irony from people who are very anti-AI was they were happy to use AI to detect AI. And I just kind of go, wait, you don't like AI? But it's okay when it's detecting whether kids are using AI.
Yeah. So a bit of cognitive dissonance there.
It's just weird that you just go, okay, I'm happy to use it for this, but if a kid's using it in the classroom, they're cheating. Oh, all right. So, I mean, yeah, for me, I think that's one area where this kind of opens up learning to students who may not have had access to, like, how many students have gone to their tutor, I need to write this essay. So they've got an outline and all they've had to do is just fill in the blanks. I mean, is that plagiarism? I don't know. If AI is doing something that's similar, why is that not a good thing? If I'm allowing I don't know if a tutor's written something, I don't know what the tutors do at home. Sibling, parents, whatever, friends who have been in your class and had this assignment and just go, geez, I remember reading that. Now, obviously that might get picked up from a plagiarism detector, but just that idea of where am I learning this information from? And I think ChatGPT, has just been like, just that whole concept of, if I don't know something, I'll Google it, get a whole bunch of stuff from Google and go, look, this is what they're trying to do, is shaping this, I'll work it together. It's just made the process faster.
Yeah, and it sort of reinforces that idea of far from making far from taking the job of a teacher, it's reinforcing the role of the teacher in and the relationships they have with their students in knowing where they're at and what level of work they're accustomed to. And when something comes in that you think, I'm not sure about this.
Yeah,
Which
absolutely.
then
And
you
that's,
go, no. Yeah.
that's the fear, I think, of teachers, is it's going to take my job. I don't think it's going to take a teacher's job. It's probably going to make your job easier, and it's going to give you more opportunities to explore different things with your students. It's going to give you, hopefully, more time to kind of nail down some of the stuff you need to work on. But it's not going to take your job, because we need to be the humans in the classroom. And so that's one area. Like as a teacher, I would be suggesting to other teachers, use it, play with it. Be careful what you plug into there, but use it and see what it can do. See what it can do for you. See what it can do for other people.
Do you want to speak briefly about what you just said then? Be careful what you put into it.
Yeah, I mean, I know with ChatGPT you can kind of switch off the analytics, that it uses your data. You can switch off that, that actually gets plugged into the system. So, but the flip side of that is, if it's not using your stuff, whose stuff is it using? Like, it's kind of that, the fear is ChatGPT will tell me about this. It's a reflection of who we are as a society. That's kind of what it does. But be careful about using kids' data, right? And that's one area that, as a teacher, it's not my data, it's a student's data, and it's one of the areas we've got to be really careful of. For me as an adult, I'm happy for it to do whatever. I can plug in my stuff. I'm happy for it to do that if I'm helping train the system. But it's not my job to use students or other people's stuff in there. So
and schools, I mean, I don't think people outside of education understand just how seriously we take student privacy in K to 12.
Yeah.
Because you're working with other people's children.
That's right, yeah. And that is part of that whole, and that's one of the areas, like for us, is when they talked about the 18 plus thing, that was one of the areas we went, well, if they're saying you've got to be 18 plus to use this, it's not really our right to be going, I'm going to plug you in anyway. So we have enough of those kind of issues that once we sort out some of those things, we may well be using it with students. At the moment, it's not something we can do. But teachers, for us, we'll have a play with it. We'll use it.
Yeah, and I'm imagining students are using it.
I think we'd be fools to say kids are not using it. They may not be using it at school. They probably are, but they may not be using it at school. Even if it's blocked, that doesn't mean that kids can't access it. So, and if they're not doing it at school, they're doing it at home. So I think that's going to shape how we change. It should shape and change how we do assessment. It should change how we go, here's a task, go and write some stuff about this. For me, like the writing about stuff is great, but actually I really want to know how you apply that. I really want to know what you can do with what you've learned. I teach a lot of food tech at the moment. ChatGPT can write some good production plans. It can write some good recipes. That's great, but it can't actually cook you a palmy just yet. At some stage it may be able to, and then I'll be really worried. But I'm okay at the moment.
Okay. Look, Matt, obviously we both are very open to and enjoy all these new technology things, but if nothing else, I can talk to you in Perth and while I'm in Melbourne. We couldn't do that not too long ago.
No, because we didn't even know what Zoom was.
No. A last thing you mentioned there, a last thing for this project as such, we're going to be sort of doing things as a group of teachers over the next few months. What would your last piece of advice or the last thing you'd like to say to teachers in regard to using AI?
I think, look, if education is not leading the learning of AI, then someone else is going to be, and it's probably going to be business. And if business is leading the learning in AI, they're probably not going to be using it for the same reasons we'd be using it for. So I think we've got to be part of that conversation. We've got to embrace that conversation. So the fear stuff, embrace that fear, play with it, see what it can do, see what it could be, and help guide the direction rather than just kind of sit back and let it happen, because it'll happen.
Yeah.
Someone will take it somewhere. Someone will do something with it. And if it's not us, then who's it going to be?
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'd be.
That's brilliant. I hadn't thought about putting it that way. Thank you for your time, Matt.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Bye.
Bye-bye. I'd like to introduce you now to Nicola Morris. Nicola is the Director of Teaching and Learning for English at the Christian College in Geelong. I think that's what we used to call the English HOD.
Yeah.
It's all become much more almost professional, I think, the whole nomenclature. Nicola has been doing some work in AI, both using it in her preparation and introducing it, as it's an independent school, introducing it to units with students. And I'm going to get Nicola to tell us a little bit more about that. So hi, Nicola, welcome.
Hello, Carolyn.
It's good to see you. First of all, what have you been using AI much in your work over the last 12 months, or I guess since the ChatGPT
Yeah.
arrival earlier this year?
Yes. Yes, I have. And when we returned for term 1 for the start of the new year, it was everything we all talked about as a faculty. And yeah, it was really interesting to see who in my team who were sort of trialing things and playing with things, and those that went, no, haven't touched it, not interested. And I basically put it on the radar that this was something we were going to have a look at as English teachers, and that we would be looking at how we introduce that to our students through stages and through an appropriate process. So yeah, I've played with it for lesson plans. I've played with it to write things for me, where then I've adjusted, but just had a little play. And I've used it predominantly with looking at progressive rubrics, where we're looking at learning progressions, so using Akara, using Bloom's and Solo taxonomy, and just playing around with the language in that space. So that's where I've used it for myself.
Okay, so have you, in your work as a department head, have you given sort of space to your teachers to have time to play, but also an expectation that they will have a go?
Certainly, given them space to play and introduce them to research. And I'm a big fan of Leon's work, Leon Furs, and so share lots of Leon's work in that space. And with the new area, with the new study design and the area of study of crafting text, that was in particular where I wanted my teachers just to start thinking about what our students are likely to do, because they're going to use it, because why wouldn't you? And what that meant for us in terms of our parameters. And as a school, we were very quick to say we're not letting students use AI yet. We wanted to make sure as a college that we worked with it as teachers first. We looked at the policy, particularly really at all the safety around setting up accounts and consent and all that sort of stuff. But I wanted my teachers to just have a little play, have a read, see what the possible issues would be, because we knew students would use it, particularly in writing.
Yeah, it's one of our sessions last week, Michelle Dennis from Haileybury was talking about, she'd been working with, she's the head of the technology stuff. It's a very technical term, technology stuff, at Haileybury, and she was working with some middle school teachers about AI and talking about it, explaining things, and they said to her, okay, can you come and do that for us?
Great.
And she said, no, that's for you to do.
You go do it.
She was training them
Yeah.
So they could go into their classrooms
Yes.
and train this and train themselves and their students.
Yeah.
That they, like you've said, I think at one point, they need to have ownership of it, or can't just have someone else coming in to do it for you. And I think another incident happened when somebody called her at some point to say that they discovered a student had used it for their essay. And she said, yeah. And they were wondering what they were doing. As she said, that's not a tech problem. That's a teaching problem.
Yeah.
You know, this is what we do in our classrooms, what's acceptable and what isn't. It's not a technology question.
Yeah. And we've had, I suppose, those two areas. So we've looked at, and you know, when you talk about the hard role and the director of teaching and learning sort of component of it. So I'm in a really fortunate position. I get to look after the English faculty, but I also get to look at learning and curriculum pedagogy across the college and other areas. So it's really exciting. But we talked about the fact that change your assessment. If kids can use AI to submit a piece of work, there's something wrong with your assessments. And we know there's a bigger, more complex issue there, and you know, all the parameters of VC and so forth. But you have to start with, what are you doing? And then the second part to it, as a college, we, through our director of teaching and learning who looks after technology, we have, we started with a webinar for teachers. It was a choice, so we didn't make everyone do it, but gosh, I think we had around 200 teachers across our campuses sign up in the initial stages.
Wow.
And it was just an hour-long webinar where we had information about AI, and we had a panel of people who had played with it, had some thoughts on it, and then there was a bit of a discussion forum. And the following session, I think we maybe waited to the next term, so that might have been term 2, and then at the start of this term, we did a bit of a breakout rooms and just to let teachers talk about what they'd trialed themselves. So again, not with students, because we're sort of at this stage very much we're not doing it with students, apart from what I'm going to share soon, where we've trialed something. But we're going step by step so that it doesn't become, it doesn't escape too quickly. We know there's so much that we're not in control of. But as educators, it's really important that our teachers know what they're doing with it, because our kids know far more than we do.
Yes, I loved the you made a comment. You used a word earlier that I love. Yet.
Yes.
We're not doing it with the students yet. That idea of, you know, people say, "Oh, I can't do this." No, you can't do it yet. We have to open. Yeah, we are going to know how to do it. You are going to know how to do it, but it's maybe not yet. So do you want to tell us a little about this unit that you are doing with your students?
So I've led the team that are running it with the kids. I didn't actually get to do it with the kids. So we have a unit in year 8 for English that is, we call it What in the World is Going On? And basically the students research an issue, current issue. So we talk to them about how do you get your news, what is news, different media, you know, current issues. They then go and choose an issue, research it, and they create a podcast and they create an infographic. So that's what they do, and we've been doing it for a few years, and it's great. What we wanted to put in this time was to trial AI. So we're using it as a tool, because it was really important that it wasn't a use AI, but actually we want students to see it's a tool for their learning that they can use just like we can as adults, because it's going to make our work life much better, basically. So I had 2 teachers on one campus trial it, my smaller campus with the 3 classes, and then 1 teacher on the bigger campus, because again, I wanted small scale, rather than it sort of get a little bit out of control. and initially I thought, oh, yeah, this will be all straightforward. And then it was my director of teaching and learning for technology who said, actually, there's a few levels we've got to put in. We've got to actually get the consent because we were using ChatGPT. So there was a bit of work in making sure our parents knew what we were doing and the why, and they agreed or didn't agree. And then we needed the students to sign up to ChatGPT at home with their parents rather than all on our network all at the same time. That's not going to work, etc. So there was those steps before we could even get to use it. We then used it for feedback. So that it literally was just for that tool where students did the research, they learned how to summarize, put it into their own words, because that's an area that we know is a real weakness, particularly post-COVID. It's become even worse. So it was that real research literacy that we wanted to focus on. Where we used ChatGPT was to get feedback on how well they had summarized the research. What was interesting is students didn't particularly value that step, which I think was a reflection on they wanted to get to the end product, which is part of what we're seeing in learning anyway. It's I don't want to follow the steps to get to this end point. And that's probably because, again, they're using it already. But I still do believe we've got to help them see the purpose of using it. And it's not just to pretend something's our own work. So, we will go back to using it towards the end of the unit where we'll get some feedback from ChatGPT. But our learnings, our takeaway was whether we would use ChatGPT again or actually use Microsoft Bing, which will be part of what we have in our system because we're a Microsoft school, and whether we'd introduce it a little bit earlier into the unit, because again, I think it lost the wow value for the students because it was already when they were in that phase of, I've got my research, let me get on with it. So it was an interesting little trial, a little test. The learnings for the teachers was probably, for me as a head of department, really valuable, and for myself. But my questions, really thinking for the students, what can I use AI for? And how can it assist in my learning? They're my takeaways that I want students to see. Does it have a purpose? If it doesn't, then I won't use it.
You mentioned some time ago when we were talking, one of your concerns around the language that we need to teach the students in order for them to be able to use it. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, and that was one of the reasons we chose to use it purely for feedback in this little pilot stage, because we know in order for it to work, and we know as adults who've played with it, you need a really strong sense of language. You need to know exactly what you want ChatGPT to do. I know in the early stages of myself, the amount of refinement. So I put something in, get it. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I need to change it again and again and again. Because things like, it's your purpose, audience, context, which we as English teachers do all the time. We actually really need to help our young people get the language for that. Otherwise, again, it's going to spit out all sorts.
That's right.
And quite often not useful.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been reminded of recently is that, and Lauren Sayer mentioned it, this is the worst version that we'll ever see of AI. Because it's going to get better.
Yes.
And the other thing, of course, is that ChatGPT is not the only generative AI tool. I know that there's quite a lot of talk about Google Bard. I haven't had a look at it yet. And I believe Dr. Lucinda McKnight has been working, I think, with South Australian schools, and they're bringing out the Microsoft thing across all of their schools. And that's going to be very interesting because they've put apparently a lot of work and research into how it can best work. And if you're a Microsoft school,
Yeah.
then I'm imagining you're going to get access to that.
Yes, I think that will make it much easier than having to set up a separate account and all those issues with consent and so forth for young people. We use Microsoft Teams as part of our again, a learning tool. And one of the things we have already got in there is a progress reading test, I think it's called. And my 5-6 teachers are using that already. And again, it's an AI. It's not a type something in, but the kids, we upload something for them to read, they read, it records, and it actually automatically gives them feedback on their fluency. So we're actually using a lot of tools without us even thinking about it, but it's really exposing to our students what it can do and what it can do for their future. And one of the things, a question I had when I was reflecting this morning was thinking about the skills framework almost. There's work there for someone to really look at what are the actual skills that we need, when I think research or just literacy, and what can AI do in that? It's almost a flow chart. What can I use it for? Is it helpful, etc., etc.?
One of the reasons I get very excited by, I love it, is that I'm hoping that this project will show this. I'm hoping it will. Is that I think for me its greatest potential is to get back some time for teachers. I don't know if I mentioned to you. So when we were 2019, early 20, we were putting together the coaching program for out of field English teachers. And so I had gone into the standards, the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers, and the performance and development cycle.
Yes. And
I spent several months deep diving to work out exactly what was it? I needed to understand what it was asking so that when we put a program together, it would meet those requirements. Months I spent on that. Earlier this year, we were putting together the workbook to go with the program. And I realized that while we are curriculum neutral in a lot of our work, this coaching program was going to be for Australian teachers. So we needed to put in a little bit about the Australian curriculum.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'd jump into ChatGPT, which I did. And first of all, I asked it if it could tell me, you're an English teacher and you're introducing the 3 pillars of English, which is literacy, language, literature, and literacy. And out it came. And I knew enough about it to know that this,
yeah.
And I said, okay, could you do a summary for me? And I got a summary, which we could then put into the workbook.
Wow.
And then I said, can we get a summary of the 6 skills that we cover in English? So reading, writing, speaking, listening, viewing, creating.
Yeah.
And out they came. And yes, we were going to check, but I knew that.
Yes.
And I could, I read it, it made sense. I knew where I was going. And then I thought I'd push my luck and ask for 2 activities for each of the skills. And out they came.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, could I have an activity for each of the skills suitable for a student with dyslexia? And boom, out it came. And that took 35 minutes.
Yep.
And
yes,
that for me is where the value is, because I know that material is out there. All the ACARA documents, all the
Yeah.
curriculum documents, everything is online for every state. They don't have to make it up. They don't have to go searching. It's there.
Yeah.
But what it did was save me an enormous amount of time.
Yep.
And that, I think, for a teacher is a massive
Yes.
saving, because then they can spend the time that we always miss
Yeah.
doing the creative stuff,
Yes.
building the relationships with the students, working out all of
Yeah.
the other issues.
Yeah.
If you take some of that admin
Yes.
stuff
Yeah,
off
no.
the table.
Yeah. I would completely agree. And I know colleagues who have been using it to generate some great lessons. Yeah, it's taken that level away. But also exactly as you just said, allows them to be creative, which is really what I think we've been missing for a little while. We've been a little bogged down with doing the curriculum
And reporting on it and
Yeah.
satisfying
Yeah.
particular criteria and
Yeah.
all of those other
Yeah.
administrative things, which have, I think, ground teachers down quite a lot over the last
100%.
decade.
And we're now moving back to the language of student agency, which is fabulous.
Yep.
But we've got to talk about student agency with AI, and we've got to allow teachers to feel they can give agency to students, and they could do that again if they've used AI to create some of that administrative load. There is more time and hopefully a little bit of passion there to be that creative teacher again and let students dare I say co-design learning and have a really active role.
Yeah.
I think it's what we all want.
I think it's what teachers have wanted for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of the whole AI thing. First of all, gets a bit terrifying until you understand what it won't do.
Yes.
What it can't do, and then look at what it can do and how that could save hours of teachers' drudge work, if I dare say.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and if we can do that for our teachers, and then we can help our students know how to use it to improve their world. You know, and I don't mean creating all this amazing technological stuff, and there will be young people that's what they do, but to actually use it to ease the load of writing something or thinking something. My own daughter last night had an English assignment, and she had to find, now let me get this right, she's doing Romeo and Juliet. She had to find another text that looked at forbidden love or dangerous love. And she said to me, I've been to ChatGPT, Mum, and they suggested, and then we had a conversation, and then we actually, I got excited, and I'm like, oh, you could do this, and we had this beautiful conversation. And with a 15-year-old daughter, that was really special for me. And that was, it came out of the fact she'd looked somewhere and then has the human contact. So
and they're talking about things at a depth that we have been missing.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Nicola, is there anything else that you would like to sort of pop in there just to finish off?
All I'd like to say is it's an exciting space to be able to do action research, inquiry, and I think the more that teachers can step into that safe space of, we're not the experts, let's just have a go, let's see what it can do and what we can learn from each other. You know, one of my colleagues who will get involved in this, he's doing some amazing things, and I'm learning so much from him, and he's an early career teacher. It's fabulous, and I think the more we can open up to sort of trial things, test things, the better for us all. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nicola. That's great. As always, wonderful working with you.
Thank you.
And I look forward to our continual conversations over the next 12 months.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.